We'll build the window seat next. Begin by cutting out the pieces. Always check your factory edges for square, and then recut when necessary. This piece was off a full 1/8 of an inch. Measure the length of the side piece and mark. Then, draw a square line from top to bottom. The size and accuracy of this 2-foot T-square has made it my favorite tool for this kind of work. If you don't own a panel saw, the next best way to cut a straight line on a large piece of plywood is to use a self-clamping saw guide like this one. Set the clamping guide in from your cut line the distance from your saw edge to your saw blade, in this case, 1 3/8 inches. Cut the line using a sharp carbide tooth plywood blade. Take care to keep the saw tight to the guide. Always cut from the back side to minimize chipping on the finished face. Measure the width of the piece and mark it out. This square has slots every 1/16 of an inch so that a pencil can make an accurate line parallel to the board edge. Set your clamping guide in place as before and make your cut, again with the better face down. Repeat the procedure for all the pieces. Birch 1x3s are used to make the side stiles for the front. They should be the same length as the plywood sides are tall. Mark them out and cut them both to length. Measure in 4 inches from the bottom and make a mark. Square across both pieces and draw a reference line. This area is the toe kick at the bottom of the cabinet. Label this location. Next, cut out the rails for both top and bottom of the front. With these pieces cut, set up the frame to visualize where everything goes. Set the bottom piece to the reference line above the toe kick. Remember to leave an extra 3/8 inch on these horizontal pieces for the cope and stick joints. Draw a square line at that location on each of the ends. The inside vertical pieces are next. They too must be 3/8 inch longer at each end to allow for the joinery. Space the vertical pieces evenly so that the panels will be the same size. Subtract the width of both vertical pieces from the finished width, in this case 44 inches. Divide this remainder by 3. That is the needed spacing for each of the panels. The vertical pieces on our cabinet are spaced 14 2/3 inches apart. Slide your tape over to a whole number and mark the 2 1/4 width of the vertical piece. Test your measurements carefully, placing the verticals in their final location as a reference. Set the next piece the same distance as the last. Then, verify the distances. Remember that the end panels will be 3/8 inch longer to account for the cope and stick joints. Transfer these marks to the front face of both horizontal rails. They'll be used as a reference during the glue-up. Mark out both sides of the rail. This acts as an insurance policy to avoid marking errors. Take your time in this layout procedure. Great results require patience. I'm using dedicated cope and stick router bits. I've found they save time and are more accurate than the adjustable kind. The cope and stick joinery provides the classical look of a raised panel assembly while assuring strong joints by increasing the area of the gluing surface. Set your router bits carefully so that the surfaces of the finished joints are perfectly aligned. Always use a push stick that allows control of the piece while keeping your hands away from the dangerous bits. The frame is ready. We'll cut the panels next. Assemble the frame on a flat surface, placing the vertical pieces on your lines. Be sure the joints are tight, then measure the width of the panel, adding 3/8 for the grooves at each side. It's easy to determine the height of the panels. Since the tongue fits perfectly into the groove, just subtract an 1/8 inch from the length of the vertical pieces to allow for wood movement. That is the panel height. Write down all the important measurements in a visible location. You may need these for reference later. Because this window seat will have an enameled finish, we're using MDF for the panels. It's inexpensive, easy to shape, and takes paint beautifully. Measure out the length of each piece and make a square line across the sheet. Use your clamping guide to make your cut, or if you haven't got one of these, clamp a straight board at both edges of the sheet. Always wear a mask when cutting MDF. It kicks up a lot of dust. Cut the panels to exact size on a compound miter saw. It takes less work to get a square cut using this tool. The panel should be 3/4 of an inch larger than the opening because of the tongue and grooved edge. If the piece is square, the diagonal measurement across both sets of corners will be equal. This large panel raising bit was purchased at a woodworker's store. Shape the pieces using 2 passes to minimize the load on the router. Work your way around the panel, maintaining constant pressure to assure excellent results. Many panel raising bits leave the tongue too thick to fit the groove. This bit eases the backside of the panel to allow a perfect fit. The goal is a joint that moves freely without being sloppy. This allows the solid lumber to move with humidity changes in the home. Create the detail at the toe kick next. Create a pattern you like on a piece of stock with the tongue already routed in it. Use a jigsaw to cut out your pattern, following your contour exactly. Then, fit it to the bottom of the cabinet and make another piece for the other side. Now we're ready to glue up the cabinet front. Test fit everything to make sure you're ready to glue up the cabinet front. Place glue at all the joints where the wood members come together, being careful not to get it into the groove. Glue the vertical pieces at the center first and clamp them together. Be sure to keep black pipe clamps from making contact with both glue and wood. They will stain the wood. Install the ends the same way, using your reference lines to locate the bottom piece. Finally, glue the detail pieces in place. Make sure to glue the top edge as well. Clamping strategies get tough in a location like this one. My philosophy is, if it works, use it. Here, an angled clamp got purchased by using another clamp to hold it in place. Make the back of the window seat next. Cut a piece of 3/4 inch birch plywood to length. Then, cut it to width. Since our clamping guide isn't long enough to reach end to end, secure a straight piece of wood to act as the saw guide. Use pipe clamps at both ends to secure both the plywood and the saw guide. Make this saw cut from the back side also. Mark out the location for a dado to receive the cabinet floor piece. Route this location in the side pieces. Mark locations for the biscuit joints and cut them in. 4 number 20 biscuits per side worked out well here. After dry fitting, glue the joints and assemble the sides. The biscuits make perfect alignment very easy. Countersink holes and install 2.5 inch screws. Cut the cabinet floor to fit and glue it in. Square the cabinet using diagonal measurements. This method will only eliminate obvious errors since the front of the piece is not yet installed. Countersink and install 2.5 inch screws every 12 inches across the back as well. Mount nailing blocks on the sides of the cabinet to install the toe kick. Glue and staple these in place. The toe kick should be cut so that it acts as a support for the cabinet floor. Cut it to length, then glue and staple it to the support blocks at both ends. 1 3/4 inch staples work best for this. Check the fit of the cabinet front, but don't install it now. It will need to be fit to the side walls after the cabinet is in.